Welcome everybody to the City Building Design Lab. My name is Josh Taron, the Associate Dean, Research and Innovation for the School of Architecture, Planning and Landscape. And we are here tonight for a panel discussion about design innovation. Well, actually, no, that's the wrong one. Is this one? No, sorry. Housing design excellence and your European perspectives. Before we get started, before I say really anything else, I'd like to start with a traditional acknowledgement. We gather today as members of the School of Architecture, Planning and Landscape with a common commitment to caring for the natural and built environments and the creative practice of making for human dwelling. As such, we pay tribute to the indigenous peoples who have provided extraordinary stewardship of this land for many thousands of years and acknowledge their deep connection to and reverence for the land and ecosystems therein. We make note that we are situated on land adjacent to where the Bow River meets the Elbow River, and that the traditional Blackfoot name of this place is Mohkinstsis, which we now call the city of Calgary. We acknowledge the traditional territories of the Blackfoot and the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Siksika, the Piguni, the Kainai, the Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nation. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. So for months and months, I've heard from Sasha about this event. And maybe before I say anything else about the event, just to recognize it is a lot of effort to put on a symposium like this. And it's really, really rewarding, I'm sure to her, but also to the faculty and myself personally, to see this kind of turnout and this kind of presentation of the work around here. I really, really look forward to the event tonight. And I think that, you know, the level of execution and the caliber of guests that Sasha has been able to bring together is really remarkable. And I think it's really fits the objectives and the agenda of the City Building Design Lab and of the school to be able to provide this level of discourse and discussion here in this place and with the public around ideas like affordable housing, around equity, about design, and really issues that are surrounding things like this. They're not, in a lot of ways, just general abstract concepts. They're real things that affect real people and that professionals are really putting their efforts toward. And so learning about that and being able to have a discussion around that, I think, is really critical. The city, even in its times of economic hardship, still has a housing crisis on its hands. So the notion of affordable housing is still not just relevant in general, but relevant to this city and the people who are here. So I really look forward to the discussion that we're able to have tonight. The person who is going to be running that discussion is Dr. Sasha Tsenkova. She holds a PhD in architecture from my favorite city in Prague, and a PhD in geography from Toronto. She's a registered planner in Canada and specializes in urban planning, comparative housing policy, and sustainable communities. Her research and professional activities in these areas for the World Bank, Council of Europe, and the United Nations include a range of housing and urban projects in more than 20 countries in Europe, Latin America, and Central Asia. She is the author of a mere 25 books and research monographs and over 50 articles on urban policy, regeneration, urban sustainability, and housing policy. Her scholarship is recognized by a number of prestigious awards for international scholars. So Sasha will say a few words more about what the panel is actually going to address and our panelists tonight, but please join me in welcoming Sasha Tsenkova.
Thank you, Josh. Welcome to everyone. It's really exciting to see you all and to welcome everyone to our City Building and Design Lab. We are very fortunate to have with us distinguished presenters, star architects that are really going to share their experiences with us. The focus of this research initiative, which is a flagship project and was launched in 2018 in response to the development of the first ever national housing strategy in Canada in 2017, is really on design excellence and planning strategies to bring more affordable housing to our neighborhoods and great cities in Canada. The issue is extremely important, particularly in an intensely urbanizing world where we have 5 billion people being part of an exciting universe of cities. And indeed, every month, another 1 million is added to the urban landscape. Unfortunately, about a third of these people have no place to call home. And this is very much an issue that we experience in large Canadian cities. So we wanted to create this exciting hub for exchange of knowledge and good practices, where people with expertise in architecture and planning, but also policy, as well as housing provision and city building, will come together to do just that. And so far, after 5,000 emails, many sleepless nights, and a lot of effort and stellar contribution from a lot of people in the university and the faculty, and indeed our international and national experts, we've accomplished just that. So we have this amazing hub that has many different narratives and papers, as well as multimedia presentations that share that knowledge from 40 different presenters from 15 different cities, 8 countries, 2 continents. The panel tonight is really going to focus on exemplary award-winning social housing projects in 8 countries in Europe. And indeed, we are privileged to have with us 3 architects that are representing that innovation and that incredible opportunity of creating places in exciting cities such as Amsterdam and London and Paris, where people will feel welcome, a place that they will call home, a place that is part of a great neighborhood, a place that is part of a great city. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, then we would actually move through the 3 presentations, and then at the end of these presentations, there would be an opportunity for all of you to ask some questions. So we are prepared to entertain a number of questions, and we have people with mics that will be running in different directions. So hold that thought, the questions will come at the end. So Christelle Avenier is a partner of Avenier Cornejo Architects in Paris, France. She's a graduate of the Superior National School of Architecture in Paris. The firm has many accomplishments in the field of social housing since 2007. It was awarded the 2014 Europe Under 40 Prize, as well as the Miss Van der Rohe Prize and many other awards. Their very diverse architecture has been featured in many publications and exhibitions in French cities, but also in globally in Architecture Review and the Wallpaper magazine, which named Avenier Cornejo among the top 20 young architectural talents of 2013. In the last 2 years, they've been busy designing new housing projects and also being engaged in exciting developments in Paris and other cities. And they have received the Architectural Review Emerging Architecture Award in 2017. So with that, I'll turn it over to Christelle.
Good. I'm good. So, about a short history and a short resume about social housing in France, we can have 4 we can find 4 big periods. The time of the precursor, which is in the 18th century. Second time, the development of cheap housing. The third time, the builder, from the 20s to the 70s. And the fourth big period, the 70s through nowadays. So this is to illustrate the first period. The Familistère were a kind of precursor. It was made by the owner of a big company for the people who were working for them, and it was a bit of a social palace. It was a shrine. There were, of course, it was benefiting to both the worker and the owner, and it was a try in social housing. So that example is in Guise, and it's called Le Familistère de Guise. That's what we call HBM, Habitat Bon Marché, which we can find in the surrounding of Paris. Usually they are in brick, and they were built at the beginning of the last century. And it was a very, very big improvement of facilities. They were having kitchen, bathroom, and it was the first big project of social housing. So this one is Cité Rouge in the 17th area in Paris. And after we have the third period, which is after the Second World War. We were needed a lot of housing, and there was a lot of big projects, and this example is in Le Havre by Auguste Perret, and it was built in the 50s. And after, for the fourth period, I'm going to show you 5 projects of our agency, which take place most in Paris, and one that is just outside Paris, in the Greater Paris. So that's the location of Paris and the Greater Paris. So the first one is in the red dot. So that's a project called Zac des Lilas. It's a client which is a social developer that belongs to the City Hall of Paris, and the program is 240 studios and a kindergarten. So it's quite an ambitious program. It's a mixed use, and it's made by 2 architects, our agency, Avenier Cornejo, and Architecten. So it's quite a dense program. So the project is on 9 levels, and we succeed to have a level that is a communal level with nice detail and very comfortable and some quality material. So that's the level in the middle. And we succeed to have this quality of material with economic of scale with this building. So we have the 240 apartments that get developed on each level with a lot of efficiency, which provide us to save some money and make a communal level with higher quality and higher material, and which would bring a bit more fluidity and a bit more space. And in the basement we have the entrance of this residence, and we have a kindergarten. So we have some light that come across the north facade to bring some light into the communal area. And we have the 3rd level, which is the communal level, which you can see have some copper, which bring a bit more light, more glass, and make the space a bit bigger. So that's another example of they have like kind of a restaurant. It's a room where they can meet and they can have a meeting. That's the television room. It's also used as a meeting room. So on this level, we have all this kind of space and full of light, and we have a balcony. When we did the competition, the client asked us not to put balcony because the apartments were so small, the people would be tempted to use the balcony as storage. And we wanted to give them outside because it's tough enough to live in a small place. So we were thinking, okay, we can give them outside on the communal area. And so after we delivered the building, we had a photographer that spent 3 days living in the building. He take a room and he live in the building. And then he could give us a feedback and take some picture of the people who were living there. So that was very interesting for us to see how the people were evolving into this building. So that's the one room where the people can come and study. This is a meeting room. So that was the first party with a baby. Another moment of meeting with people doing some standing talk. And after, he also meet the people, and he give us the luxury to see how people live inside each apartment. So each apartment, it's about 23 square meters with a bathroom and a kitchen. And we design also the furniture. So the idea was they just came with a bag, and they can have the room they want to live in. So we can see that they are all using the room in their own way and making the best of the way they want to have the kitchen, for example, or another way of doing the kitchen. And the room can also be a bedroom, a living room, or a meeting room with friends. So even with small space, we could see that the people were putting their personality inside each studio. We also take a lot of energy to make the entrance look nice, because this is the first place you see when you come inside the building, and we thought it was very important that the people were proud to be living there. So on the basement we find also the kindergarten, which have a long garden all along the building. You have to know that we have a very small boundary towards the height of the building, nine level of storage, and we just have 400 square meters of garden. But because it's a line, it's very useful for the kindergarten, so they can use it with a bicycle and their little trolley. We also make a big effort to work with a graphics designer for the graphic inside each room of the kindergarten. And so that's the building from outside. It have a very angular side, which give him a particular look. So that's the building with his 240 studio and his own identity. For this second project, it's another social housing, but this one it's a small one, 14 apartments in a very popular area, which is the 10. So this area is called Faubourien, which is a popular area. And we try with this project to make a link between the two building neighbors. So there's a little house, one storage, and another one. And we were trying to make a link between these two. And so we make the link with the shape, with inclined plan, but also we make the link with material which is concrete and give a little bit of vibration that remind us the Faubourien area. So it's a bit of we try to have a more contemporary interpretation of Faubourien architecture. So we choose on this project to put the bedroom on the north facade, on the road. As you can see, the entrance and the bedroom are on the north, the entrance. And we choose to put the living room on the south facade on a garden with more privacy, with more sun. And every apartment have an outside. And it's a little loggia that gives them privacy and gives them a bit of distance between each other. So every time we work on the building, we try to make the most space possible toward the square meters that we have. And for this, we use the light a lot and the shutter to give a bit of modularity in the living. So on this apartment, we benefit of the tree from a neighbor because it was a very small garden, but this tree is very useful. We can use it, it's like a filter for the sun a bit. So on this picture, you can see the two lay of loggia. It's a very small building, so there's only 2 apartments on each level. And we try to work the light from every room of the building. So this is an example of the room on the top. So you can see the similarity with the old building. And we work the light inside the bedroom. We try to find a way to put light inside this kind of room for the quality of the space. And also on the terrace on the top floor, which is a very nice place to be. So that's how the building gets inside this street and between these 2 buildings, which are going to be preserved because this little house have a special attraction in the area and is going to be protected. This other project is social housing just outside Paris, in the Greater Paris, and it was a project with very on budget. We didn't have too much money for this project, so we try to work on the material, and we use 2 materials: the brick and the metal perforated. With the brick, we try, because it was very on budget, we tried to make a simple detail, which was a diamond on the facade, and we use the same diamond on the perforated facade. So the building would have 2 perspectives. One perspective from the area, very close, and another perspective with the perforated facade from a bit further away from the peripheric. So this building would have an identity, and in the same idea, it would give the people who live there, it would give a good feeling or be proud to be there, because we believe in this, that if people are proud to be there, it's a good attitude that go towards life. So in every apartment, the same idea to have an outside. So that's an example of the outside, which is generous but not too big neither. The facade perforated, which is on the south facade. So in summer, it can be used also to be protected from the sun. The entrance that we try to make with quality and with an identity. So we give them a lot of light that go through a garden in the entrance, and we use the tile to make it more visible. And that's the way the sun can animate the little balcony, the little loggia. So same. The space are not too big, but we try to bring a lot of light inside to give them a lot of quality. And that's how the brick meet with the metal. And from the outside, the vision that the building gives. It's a picture of one of the workers who set up the brick, because I think we give them a bit of a hard time on the construction, so he needed a bit of acknowledgement. And we can see the TGI, which is a new building in Paris. So like this city is taking a bit the dynamic of Paris. This project, this is the fourth one, it's a project for HSF, Habitat Social Français, which is also a client social developer, which belong also, which is linked with the city of Paris. And this project has the particularity to be a building with positive energy. So it produces more energy that is using energy. So for the competition, to win the competition, we try to be to think a bit, and we make the shape of the building very efficient. So we use the U shape with a south orientation inside the garden, and the north orientation towards the street. So we use again two materials, the brick and the metal panel. The metal panel is used to be protected from the sun. The brick is on this project is also to remind the neighbor, which is also a social housing which belongs to la RIBP. And so we were trying to translate an antique way of building in brick into a contemporary language. So we use a tram, which accompanied every window, and we also put a little bit on the top level some design with blue brick here, which we can find quite often on the building in Paris, especially the ones that are in brick, and from the HBM, which I talked about before, les habitations bon marché. So that's how the old and the new can have a talk together. Also, we had a comfortable budget on this project, because it was a special one with positive energy. So also we use very good material quality for this project. So in the entrance we have terrazzo, which is small pieces of marble with concrete or resin. And we also use terrazzo in the communal in the corridor, in the communal part. Inside the building, we were able to have some proper wood floor, and in the bathroom, some natural light. So we also have in this building on the top level some duplex, which are apartments on 2 levels, and it's a bit assimilated to it's like a feeling to be in a house. So that's another view of the living room with outside with a balcony, because that's always nice to be able to go outside your apartment and like have the coffee in the morning and be in the fresh air. So we always try to have this outside part, and this is a facade that are protected from the sun with the shutter. Just a little sham to show you how we did technically to succeed for this positive energy project. So the main thing is the heating is being provided with wood. So 2 times a year we have a delivery that go in the chaufferie, and this wood provides the heating. We also use the rain for the garden. We have some outside insulation, so the building is made in concrete, insulation and brick, which made like wall with a thickness of about 50 centimeters. which is quite good. And we use the energy from the hot water. We recycle this energy. We have, of course, we have some electric panel for the electricity, and also we are using the energy on the stop of the elevator to be reused. So, of course, we work with a special engineer who help us to provide this. So it was very interesting to be part of this project. And the last project, it's for RIVP, another social developer from the city of Paris. And this one, it's a special program because it's a private and social housing. The private, in fact, it's an association of musicians who own a land in Paris, but they are musicians, amateur. They have no money, and they want a new space, a new place for concert hall, a new place for repetition. So they had the idea to associate the client to their project. So the deal was, we give you the land, you make your 50 housing studio for students, and you build us a project for our musicians to have a concert hall and to have some repetition room. So this building is the outside. The outside is the residence for the students, and the basement is the musician place. So we can see how it gets developed. Under the earth, we have the 2 levels for the musician, and on top we have the studio for the student, which I think it was a very smart idea to mix. Voila, that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. So that's the team.
Thank you very much, Christelle. This is fascinating. How do you build special places for people brick by brick? Now we are going to see a presentation by Paul Karakusevic, who is partner of Paul Karakusevic and Carson Architects in London, the United Kingdom. He founded the practice with the sole intent to raise standards in housing design and public buildings in the UK after 40 years of neglect. The design firm has extensive experience in mixed income, mixed use redevelopment in London. They successfully navigate planning, policy, and national design standards to create exemplary housing that reflects a unique sense of place with respect to history and the local character and heritage in a place. Their projects have won numerous RIBA in housing design and New London Architecture and Civic Trust Awards, and the practice has been named Housing Architect of the Year in 2012 and 2014. Paul is also the lead author of Social Housing in Europe, and he's also the curator of the exhibition that we were able to bring to Calgary, which is right here in the CBD lab. The exhibition itself brings 25 projects of social housing in European cities in 8 countries in Europe. They are all award-winning projects, and I've been privileged to be part of the curation of that exhibition together with my colleague Mark Bouten and Fiona and Ashley that are sitting here in the audience, architects aspiring to make a difference. So with that, I'll turn it over to Paul.
Thank you very much, Sasha, and thank you, the University of Calgary, for the invite. It's humbling to be halfway around the world talking about housing in London. Just going to start with a little bit of London context. That's London. We have a river as well. It's the Thames. We also have a Bow River, which is about here and wiggles up through northeast London. That's Tower Bridge. A little bit of history. And our factory, we have a space inside this old biscuit factory, which in one part about 100 years ago was the world's biggest biscuit producer. And pretty much every biscuit you can imagine was invented and made there. Conveniently, we're surrounded by some of London's biggest housing estates. Probably not enough time to go into all of the history of that, but this is our studio. So we're also, I hear that this is also a meanwhile space in the old library. So we're a meanwhile 5-year space inside an old biscuit factory. So our meetings are always very well attended, and there's always lots of biscuits around. So we did a very low light fit out of an old factory space. Luckily we had skylights. We put a simple concrete floor in with underfloor heating and then just brought in lots of furniture. So that's where we've been. Unfortunately, we're going to be out in about 6 months, so we're now looking for another big factory. A little bit of history for those that are not so familiar with London. We used to be quite good at building public housing. There was a wonderful planner called Patrick Abercrombie who he was such a good planner, he started replanning London in 1942. He obviously one of the few people with a great vision. That was based on the success of winning the war, which 3 years in wasn't looking very promising. But he had a vision to rebuild, but also establish a national house building program. And by 8 years later, post-war, the public sector were building 200,000 homes plus per year across the country. And nationally, it didn't all look like that, but including the private sector, over 400,000 homes a year. So essentially the public sector was building half of all of the new housing in the UK. Things changed for the younger people in the audience. This is Margaret Thatcher. She had a rather dramatic effect on many industries, but also housing production. In 1979, she stopped pretty much all public subsidy into public housing. She supported the market sector, but didn't support the public sector. And 25 years later, the legacy was that we made 130 social homes. So from 200,000 to 130, and most of them look like this. So it was a rather tragic moment. Shortly after, this is Gordon Brown. Followed Tony Blair as Prime Minister, and at his inauguration speech, he said he will allow the public sector to invest again in building homes. And 7 years later, we made 3,000. So a rather, again, feeble attempt. In the middle of that, obviously there was a financial crisis which slowed things down a little bit. Theresa May, very short stint in number 10, Downing Street, but for the people in public housing, she did lift an artificial borrowing cap that the local government had been given after as part of the austerity. They'd sort of been given a cap of about £100 million per local government for public housing. She lifted that, which is really going to help in the coming decades, providing it doesn't get taken away. Shelter is one of the biggest, well, probably the biggest homelessness charity in the UK, and they estimate that we need about 3 million new truly affordable homes, not just for homeless people, but people on low incomes as well. You probably recognise this chap. I don't think he's scratching his head about the housing problem,
No.
but it was a good, timely photo. So the future, we think it's taken 12 years since Gordon Brown for the local authorities to start building again and thinking about building. In London now there are 20 of the 32 municipal councils, local government. 20 are now setting up their own housing programs. They have huge existing housing stock, but haven't built, many of them haven't built for 40 years. So this is one of our smaller projects in the studio, the Backton Estate, and it's probably the most ground up After 30 years worth of neglect, the residents on this particular estate were getting a little bit fed up. It's not necessarily the worst housing estate ever. 1960s, this is in a part of North London next to Hampstead Heath, so quite a affluent, surrounded by quite affluent area. And either side of the image is some of the best public housing that was made in the UK. We have Neve Brown just over here, Benson and Forsyth just over here, Chamberlain, Powell and Moore as well. So it's absolutely surrounded by the classic 1960s housing. But unfortunately, the Backton was rather unloved. And we got a call one day, completely out of the blue, from Sarah, who was one of the residents. And she asked whether we could attend an interview that night in the community centre. They were going to pick new architects to redesign their housing estate and rebuild it. And she called 5 other practices. Only one other turned up. Everyone else thought she was obviously completely, well, not of sound mind maybe, to think that a group of residents could engage with the local authority and then rebuild their housing estate. But it's exactly what happened. We ended up, I think we were second on, and we ended up having a 3-hour talk and interview. We were shortly then appointed formally by Camden Council to develop a master plan and then the detailed drawings. We realised the big models we've always made came from an understanding that unless you studied architecture, you probably don't understand two-dimensional drawing. So whenever we talk with residents and sometimes our clients, we always take big models along. And if it's not big models, they're very big drawings that people can really get inside so they can understand exactly what we are discussing. So this is a real ground-up, resident-led approach to rebuilding, quite urban design-led. We had some lovely assets here. We've got St Martin's Church. This is Vickers Lane. It's all quite romantic. It sounds romantic. We've got the high-speed railway into Euston just here. And Camden Council had a little fragment of land here which we could move the first wave of replacement homes and residents into. So I think we met the residents about 350 times in the first few years of the project. They were really, really involved and have been incredible design champions and advocates all the way through. They even visited the brick factory to make sure the bricks that they were seeing on the production line were the same as the brick samples we'd shown them in the earlier months. And actually, when the project was on site, they were brilliant. If there was ever a problem with the builders, they'd call up and say that the builders are doing something naughty, can we please come round quickly to stop it? So they were really, really engaged. So it's 300 homes in total. Everyone who wanted to stay in the housing obviously had a place to come back. Sometimes people criticise new build estates housing because there's a risk of displacement. I can guarantee on our projects there is never any displacement. They're absolutely socially motivated local councillors and teams who are very dedicated at keeping all of the residents on site if they want to stay there. Obviously, if they don't want to stay there, free to go. So this is the first phase. Combination of lovely townhouses, 4-storey townhouses, probably built to the highest. They're about 160 square metres, which is pretty amazing. The minimum for a 4-bed in London is 105, so about 50% bigger. And then a series of family maisonettes, a little apartment building here, and then a small market sale building here that helps to cover the costs of the first phase. So there's 44 socially rented, and if I say social, it means the government rent, which is the most affordable rent in the UK. So this is an example of the townhouse. In London, we often have flat-fronted Victorian houses, sometimes with a front garden, normally with a back garden, but here we have the railway, so we had to put the garden on the roof. But we were very lucky. We a view here overlooking the spire, but also across the whole London skyline, and on this side over Hampstead Heath. So they're really, truly remarkable family family homes. So we had a kitchen, a dining room, a front living room, a rear living space opening out onto this little patio, and then a south-facing living room that looks over the new garden and play space for the kids. We realised quite early on that British builders were not very good, and we also had a thing called design and build for the architects in the room, which I always thought was a North American construct until recently when I was in Australia, and it was actually invented in Sydney by a big Australian builder. So we design and build, by the time we got to London, was a sort of bastard child, I think, of the original idea of giving builders some say in the design and construction of housing. So we've realised that if we don't draw it, it doesn't get delivered. So every single aspect of the building is drawn in a lot of detail, so there's no wriggle room for the builders to avoid. So here just showing the quality of the landscape, beautiful brick detailing, deep recesses to give a real quality. Big double height lobbies, very legible, clearly visible routes and views through to the lifts. Lots of light to really transform the notion of what good affordable housing is. And this is the little apartment building finished. And then the townhouses. So we had to fight quite hard. The legacy of the Margaret Thatcher cuts is that the only people, well, most of the people left in the housing departments were from the old school. And things like putting wood floors in social housing was just a complete no-no. They did not get it. Why in 2012, when we designed the scheme, why people would want nice wood floors. They said, no, we don't give wood floors to social tenants. They're not worthy of good quality materials. So we had many, many discussions with them that actually, if we build it well, it's a lot easier to maintain. They'll really enjoy it. And after 3 years, you won't have to replace all the horrible carpets. So in the end, we won that discussion. And this is the example of one of the little downstairs sitting rooms. Dujardin Mews, I think French origin. It's the only, well, no, I shouldn't denigrate. Charlotte Dujardin was an Olympic horse rider, and I think she was the only medalist from this particular London borough. So we made a new street, and the residents decided it should be named after the horse rider. So this is right in the top of London, in one of the poorest areas. And Enfield Council had not built any housing for 40 years before this project. And we had a very young, very ambitious client, and he was desperate that the council should start building directly housing again. About a year earlier, the council had given a big house, a not-for-profit housing association and a big housing developer the right to rebuild the Alma estate on the other side of the road. But there was this slither of land here, which at first, on the first site visit, wasn't very promising, where they wanted to build some new replacement homes for the first wave of residents coming out of one of the towers. And so there are the towers in plan. This is a former gasworks, so not, again, not very promising, massive industrial estate, and then the edge of suburban London here. And the master planners of the school, that was the area needed for the school, and then they forgot this little piece of land, which was quite helpful. So we made, I think the urban designer in the council thought we could fit one row of townhouses in, but we all know, especially the urban designers and the planners in the room, that a single-sided street is not very good, especially when the new school was going to have about a 10-foot high fence along this line. So we worked very hard with the head of planning, who had Enfield had just produced a document requiring 24-metre distances between habitable rooms. So from here probably to the wine and the bar over there. And obviously, if you do that, you end up with a very loose city and not many homes being built. So we negotiated really hard that actually a London Mews is about 12 to 13 metres wide, and it's quite successful. Half of West London has them in the rear to the grand houses and mansion blocks. And if it works there, why shouldn't it work here? So we were able to negotiate a much tighter packed site. And instead of, I think, the 16 homes that was originally intended, we managed to create 38, mainly townhouses. And on the plan, we've got a double house here, which looks like a house, but it's actually got two front doors. One into a courtyard, 2-bedroom apartment, and another door that goes upstairs to a family maisonette. And then on this side, where we were running out of space, we turned the normal house round. We also realised that the new planning policy said we needed to create as many cars as possible, parking spaces as possible. So we had to create on-plot parking in a very, very, very shallow plot, which gave us a few challenges, but we think we got over it. And then here there's some slightly more traditional townhouses, but with very high environmental code. So the whole project was seen as a bit of a prototype for the new Enfield housing programme. Slightly blurred model, I think, but that's in 3D. This is, again, the level of detail we would go into planning to lock in as much detail and then take those planning drawings forward into very detailed specification drawings. And then an example, just the 3D drawing here showing the little courtyard flat and then the upper maisonette. And then populated in a slightly distorted perspective axonometric, if that's not a contradiction. And so it's showing the sort of the quite deep plan, but light coming everywhere. And then the staircase hidden behind there to this upper maisonette. Lots of top light, and lots of sort of family-sized accommodation. And then the townhouses. So the little garage, terrace above the garage, and then the little 3-story townhouse. Again, with some inhabitation. So the new London, the mayors, the last 2 London mayors have introduced design standards for all new housing, and they're actually quite generous, and we're trying to, in a way, push that. They're minimum standards, so we're trying to push those on every single project we undertake. And then this was finished about 2 years ago, so all the residents have moved in over the last 18 months, and it's really sort of coming to life now. A lot of the residents from the first tower have now moved in, and they said, they'd never met their neighbours before. A lot of them are saying, oh, we now know everyone in the street. It's got a really wonderful sense of community, and there's a real sort of sense of safety as well in the new neighbourhood. So the King's Crescent Estate is, this was our second project for Hackney Council. So one of the most progressive boroughs in terms of new housing. And we've been working with Hackney now for about 12 years on 3 big housing estate projects. So this is a late 1960s estate, brick built, so it had quite good structural characteristics. And this is the existing barrier blocks around the edge. And then in 1999 to 2000, the 2 towers here and here had been demolished. Because the buildings had not really been maintained for such a long time, the lifts didn't work, the windows were falling out, the residents really did not want to live there. So they'd all moved out, and Hackney had this real problem of an estate that couldn't be let. So the towers came down. Unfortunately, then there were 3 failed attempts at rebuilding the new master plan, and we were lucky to win a competition to try for a 4th time. By this point, you can imagine the residents were getting quite fed up. But we were able to develop a master plan that was viable. This is about a year after the credit crunch had happened. So we created a viable master plan that Hackney could start to invest in and gradually build out. And we did that by, oops, I think it's that way, sorry. Working very, very closely with the residents. This is what the residents had been looking at for about 15 years. Many of these flats had been boarded up, and the area had a lot of drug issues. It was the centre of the North London, most of North London's vice was on the street behind here, so a state with real problems, but a real strong sense of community. And we worked very closely with the residents to develop a plan that they could support. And slightly differently, in the early, late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of the housing estates that were going for regeneration with housing association partners, there was just a decision to knock down everything. But here is a very different approach of retaining the good buildings, introducing winter gardens, taking out the garages, reconfiguring those as sort of new hidden homes on the ground floor and lower ground floors, improving their thermal performance, and then wrapping the existing buildings with new build where the gravel and the mounds are all here. So we sort of created 3 distinct courtyards and gardens, and they're shared between the residents of the old building and the new. So the 3 new buildings are a completely mixed tenure, a lot of new social housing, intermediate housing, and a little bit of market sale housing that helps pay for everything. So these are a range of, we've got more normal apartments, 1 and 2 beds downstairs, and then these lovely 3-bedroom maisonettes that are up on top to give this idea of the notion of you can have a family dwelling if it's very generous. And again, with any architects in the room will maybe recognise this brick brand, one of the most expensive brick companies in the world. But because Hackney Council were running the project, any value they created, they kept in the pie. There was no loss of profit, nor loss of any money to an outside party. So we could build at a very responsible budget level, but also specify beautiful materials. And this is how it looks now. So we've just finished the first half. We're just moving now on to phase 3 and 4. So this is one of the social rent buildings. They're all completely tenure blind. And then this is one of the new lobbies into that building. And then a new play street. On this project, we collaborated with a practical Henley Hale Brown Rorison and Muff Landscape Architecture and Art. So they worked on the play streets with us. So it's a real sort of community asset. It links Highbury through to the park, and then lovely new apartments. And then the Colville estate, we'll go through very quickly. This is really the pioneering project for Hackney Council, where this was the existing housing, quite outwardly maybe not the worst housing in the world, but the residents again had 20 years, 30 years of really fighting with Hackney to get something better. And got Mike, Elvis, Noreen, Maggie, and unfortunately Hilda is no longer with us, but the most incredibly spirited residents. And they really worked very closely with us to sort of deliver this project over the last 12 years. So here's the master plan. So it's 900 new homes replacing 400 old homes. And the residents had an incredibly strong residence charter, which was all about as much new housing as possible at lower rents, but the new housing at low rent should not be high-rise. It sort of 4, 5, 6, 7 stories was seen as an ideal. Unfortunately, if you did that across the whole site, you'd only end up with 700 homes. So we needed some more density here to create the cross-subsidy to pay for all of the low-rise housing. So this is Branch Place. This is phase 2. It's just been finished. The residents are just all moved in now. Thank you, Vincent. And so a real range, probably every single apartment type and dwelling type in here. So 4-storey, look like townhouses, but they're 2 duplexes, and then little apartment buildings around the edge, and then they sort of wrap around this little communal garden. And And then again, sort of this idea of drawing every single aspect of the project and specifying every material to lock in that quality. And then these lower homes sort of fold over a little car parking space below. So sort of trying to engender a real quality of both indoor and outdoor space across the project. And I should leave it there. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. I think that this is quite an exciting story that illustrates how complicated it is to actually deal with some of our past models of city building, which was the high-density tower block in the park, and how complex it is to actually come back and revisit the old city structures of the old historic city that were really about diverse typologies and attention to detail and building communities with shared spaces where people can actually create a sense of ownership and belonging, indeed with intensive public participation. We are moving now to Amsterdam, and we are really very happy to have Jeroen Atteveld with us, who just flew in from Amsterdam a couple of hours. Quite a testament to the Dutch resilience and indeed the commitment of Dutch architects in particular to social housing. So Jeroen is part of Heren 5 Architects, and he is a committed architect indeed, who builds his designs around a strong idea. The basis of his work is anchored in design research on urban user groups, so again, a lot of attention to people and places. With his open and inquisitive attitude, he searches for new opportunities in his projects that contribute to a sustainable, inclusive, and innovative living environment. He has over 15 years of experience in designing social housing in the Netherlands, and is always looking for that bit of extra that adds value to the social housing project. So Heren 5 Architects have extensive experience with the design of living environments that people identify with. The team is driven by a mission to make neighborhoods more beautiful, better, and healthier. And they have been privileged to work on a lot of award-winning projects that address issues of mobility, inclusiveness, and climate change. With that, Jeroen.
Thank you very much. Sasha, for inviting us and giving us a stage tonight to share some projects of our office in Amsterdam. More than social housing, that's how our lecture is called. And this is our office. A month ago we were in Copenhagen looking for social housing projects there and how they deal with the important issue of making housing in cities. Today I'm here and for the coming days as well to also learn. I already learned a lot from the previous speakers. Thanks, it's nice to see what happens in our neighboring countries. But I also want to contribute some of our experience tonight and also tomorrow. Again, I think it's maybe coincidence, we also have a river. It's there. It's the River I, and this is the central station of Amsterdam. We're based on the other side. We are an experienced office, more than 25 years in experience in housing projects, but we still have a very young spirit, and I think that's important in our business. And we work on a wide range of projects, from social housing projects to large-scale urban design, but also interior design and parking garage. So it's a wide range, but the three pillars of our work is people, story, and tomorrow. And people is because we really are interested to find out what people, how people want to live. We want to find out what their desires are, what their housing needs are, and we conducted many studies on user groups to actually come in contact with the people we build for. And story is for us very important because we believe that a good story has multiple characters. The characters can be the future inhabitants, it can be the clients, it can be the location. And I think somehow it should be important that if you make a good project that everything should come together there. And tomorrow is for us important because we do a lot of research, also research by design studies on renewable energy and climate adaptation and what it means for the housing projects that we do. But we're here now for social housing, of course. And what was funny or what was interesting after being asked to attend in the symposium was that we were actually thinking, okay, what is the message that we want to give looking back at our own work? And we found out actually that the question, what makes social housing good housing, is something that we found very interesting. And we think that for our projects there are three themes that kind of define this question. The first one is creating added value and a sense of pride in our projects. I'll just show you briefly now what these themes are, and then I will go into that. That's basically the setup of the presentation. Secondly is housing that suits the target group. For whom are we actually building? And the third one is making residential environments that are mixed and distinctive. These three topics basically define our social housing projects. And before I go into these themes, I think it's also good, like the other speakers, we didn't communicate about it, but it's good to have a bit background about social housing in the Netherlands. Because it's kind of interesting. I have this theory that in the Netherlands we are, most of the people live far below sea level. In Amsterdam the lowest point is maybe almost up to -6 meters below sea level. So to keep our feet dry we have this collective consciousness. We have to work together to keep our feet dry, and that's, I think, is why we decided all in 1901 that we should have this housing act that made sure that everybody should have good housing. Everybody should have a right on housing, and therefore this is maybe a picture of one of the last slums in Amsterdam. We thought that was not possible anymore. And but the definition of social housing is, I think, different for many countries. For us, it means that in the Netherlands, the local government or government is not involved in social housing. We have housing associations that build housing blocks to rent it out in the social housing sector. The beneficiaries are the tenants with a maximum income of 35,000 euros per year. And they have to wait, at least in Amsterdam, for maybe 10 to 15 years to find a place. So that says also something about the amount we have and is needed. The thing is, and these housing associations are privately, or not privately owned, but independent organizations. They don't get subsidies from the state. They work on their own, but they have special loans on favorable terms by a special bank, basically. And that's how it works in the Netherlands. And I think because we have this long tradition in making social housing, you could see that we have almost 35% of the Dutch housing stock is made out of social housing, which I think is very something to be proud on. And in Amsterdam even we have up to almost to 40% of the housing stock is made out of social housing, and the problem now is increasing. This is an interesting map because it shows the real household price growth and the real household income growth over the past 5 years. And this is actually pretty shocking. You see that Amsterdam, the house prices have been raising with 63%, almost 64% in the last 5 years. But the income growth was only 4.4%, has a 4.4% raise. Which means that there's now a big gap for the middle income people, that they can't find any houses anymore in Amsterdam, and only the housing associations now have to pay a reverse subsidy to the state of the Netherlands, and they're basically cut down in providing houses for middle class people, middle income people. And last thing I can say about it is that it's nice to see in the Netherlands we have this civic pride on social housing. This is one of the first housing blocks, the ship, that was delivered by Michel de Klerk. And this is a national monument, and this is like, if you go to Amsterdam, this is one of the most beautiful buildings to see and visit. And it's nice, I think it's nice that you showed the palace in France. It's, I think, the same kind of idea that social housing is something that we consider as something very important, and therefore it should also have a good architecture. So then back to the first point, creating added value and a sense of pride on the question, what makes social housing good housing? And as an example, this is a project I like to show. This is a Polderweg in Amsterdam. It's 100% social housing, 72 apartments. And it's kind of interesting because this is a whole development that was being done in Amsterdam. And this is our block, and it basically is the front of the whole development, and the rest of the houses are mostly expensive houses and privately owned houses. But our block kind of sets the architectural standard for the whole neighborhood, which I think is very good that we kind of turn it around. And also for the renters in the place, they could actually choose what kind of house they would like. If they want to have like a house with a living room and kitchen from front to back, or on the whole width of the house. So giving people the opportunity to actually choose what kind of floor plan or what kind of house they have makes also that they can feel more at home. And we just talked before about Avenier, it's a housing association in Amsterdam. It's very special because they have a long time relationship with their houses that they built. They built something for life, basically. Therefore, they spend also a lot of money on art in the housing blocks that we make for them. So we work together with Stefan Glerum. He's a stained glass artist. And he put the whole history of that location into a glass piece work that we could incorporate in the design. And it's also really nice to work together with artists because I think if you can kind of stack both our knowledge together, we can make something that is really good. And I bet that the kids who grow up there now, if you're 4 years old and you get home in such an entrance, when you're 60 you can still remember that. And I think that's something that a good architecture can do. Up to the second theme, housing that suits the target group. It's funny, in 2005 we published our first book, At Home. And this is an architecture book, I think the first architecture book in the Netherlands without any architecture pictures. We have 7 characters in this book that are inhabitants of our houses. And in 2005 we held an inquiry among all the people who lived in the houses we had delivered by that time, because we were interested to know what at home means for those people. And so we also came here with Captain Schouten's house. This is his old house and this is his new house that we designed. And for us it's very inspiring to hear what at home means for people, because that inspiration is what we use by the starting of new projects that we do. And here some later studies is Nesting in the City, is a publication on city-orientated families. And we call them city veterans, that are elderly people that want to live in the city, but not in like these old complexes or in institutionalized complexes, but they have also special needs. And for Nesting in the City, we work together with 3 housing associations and also the community of The Hague. They subsidized us to do this study, and at the same time they have a lot of knowledge about what the user groups of the city of the families want, and that was for us also. It's also good, I think, to share that it's not only building blocks. It's also good to do research on for whom we are building, because we found out I think in 2011. That a lot of families in Amsterdam were attempting to move away from Amsterdam, and not because they want to leave the city, but they couldn't find appropriate housing. You see that, for instance, the outdoor spaces were far too small. The streets have been taken over by cars, and maybe most of all, the most built floor plan in Amsterdam was the floor plan where we asked ourselves, okay, is this really where you want to grow up with if you have a family in the city? And the strange thing is, these floor plans have a width of 7.50 meters because you can exactly stack 3 cars underneath. So sometimes it means that the size of the cars, of the building systems that the builders use are basically seem to be more important than having a good functional house. And I'll explain how this Dutch apartment works, because here's the gallery. You enter in from here. So if I take off my coat, I will hit the weather station from the wall. You will walk past the most private rooms of the house through a long hallway, and then you enter the big living space where all family lives takes place. And we thought, well, maybe this is not the way we want to do it. And then we saw this movie, Un giornata particolare from Sofia Loren. And here she walks through the house to wake the whole family up. And after seeing this fragment, we were very interested to see what kind of floor plan she had, because here you never see a long hallway like we had, and she goes from room to wake everybody up. So that inspired us to contact the people who worked in our office from Mediterranean countries. So we asked Francesca from Genoa in Italy, who lived already for 3 generations there in the top apartment, to draw mental maps of the houses they grew up in, so we could learn from other countries what they've done to live with a family in the city. And the funny thing is, this is her apartment, and she said, it's the apartment is made out of a lot of rooms, and one of the smallest rooms was the kitchen, and it was the room where most of the family spent most of the time all year round. And even the entrance hall was not just a tiny hallway, it was like a space that was used for her, where she would drink with her friends, where she before she went out in the weekends. And the funny thing was that maybe the only disadvantage that her sister, who lived here, could never bring her boyfriend home, because her parents had to walk through her room to go to the But for us it was very inspiring to see how you could also think about apartment. And then closer to home, I visited the Borra family in Amsterdam West in a Portico flat. And they were not very happy with their apartment, because they explained that we have the kitchen here and the living room there, but here are the sleeping rooms. So at night we can never bring friends home, because if you go to the bathroom, the whole life is mixed. And while talking with them, it was they suddenly said, we also have an apartment in Turkey still. And it was very interesting to hear them talking about that apartment. So while we were chatting, we were just drawing that map of their apartment. And this apartment had like a private and a public domain, so to say. So the private domain, that was the area where only the family members would come. That would be the place where, if you want to have some peace and quiet, you could sit there and read a book, or that is where the sleeping rooms and bathroom is. And this is let's say, the public domain with the big hallway, where it was very important for them to, when friends come over, that you can meet everybody with the whole family. And the better you knew the family, the deeper you would get in their house. So if you were not very acquainted, you have to wait here. And if you were the best friend, you could just go through the back of the apartment. But the spatial organization of that floor plan was, in a way, so clever that kind of helped us or inspired us to think about what good housing is. And another family that we visited in the center of Amsterdam explained us, it's really important for our kids that they can go outside. It's good for their development. So when the neighbor is not home, they just climb over the fence and they start playing soccer in his garden. And we were talking with a psychologist also about what it means for kids to grow up in the city. And it's important that they can kind of find their way, and that it's good that they're supervised, but it's also good that they can discover things. And so this sheltered urbanity that we were looking for is something that we kind of took into the back of our minds in designing blocks. So in the end, we came up with multiple design guidelines, ranging from the neighborhood scale to building scale and to apartment scale, that we still use now in the blocks that we make for big families. Because the first project that we've done after finishing the study is this, the Kolekit house. This is a block with 100% social housing for a housing association in Amsterdam. For big families also, and yeah, the question also was that I think it's 5 family members or more, so that was also good for us to kind of test our own design guidelines if it would work or not. And what I said about the sheltered urbanity was we could make on the inside, we could make an elevated street where the younger kids could play. And also here that would be the place where yeah, if there are no cars you could play some soccer there. And on the larger scale, this is our block, you see that even the local government could come up with an idea to keep it car free. So for the older kids, it's also good to go really outside of the block and have this range of action for the older kids. And in the end, this block became a kind of a catalog of the design principles that we came up with. So basically, every house has its own principle based on the things that we learned by talking to all these families. And one of the things that we could actually realize here was that we could have this private and public domain, like I explained before, where we have also this annex, which is basically the extra room, and that can be used either for the night program as an extra sleeping room or as an extension from the living room. And yeah, that was really nice for us to go back there and visit these people and to actually hear if our plans worked or not. And now we are working on another block with the same design principles that will be finished next year. So maybe next year I can tell you a bit more about that. And the last topic is making residential environments that are mixed and distinctive. Again, on the question what makes social housing good housing. And it's nice that 60% of the Dutch housing stock is made of these kind of row houses. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but we have so many of them that if you, I could ask anyone in the Netherlands, but nobody would know if this is Amsterdam or Rotterdam or somewhere else. They all look the same. In fact, we have so many of them that if you would stack them all together, you could have one straight road from Amsterdam to Calgary. And on both sides you could have these houses, and you would still have enough to make the street all the way to San Francisco. And I've been flying 9 hours today. I was just imagining how long block that would be. But the problem with these houses is that these neighborhoods, they don't have an identity. They all look the same. And we had the opportunity to transform this neighborhood of 160 social houses into something, something completely different. And we didn't do that alone. We started with this, we call the flag tour. We had the green, red, and orange flags. And we went with the neighborhood, with the people who live in the neighborhood. We went out, and people started putting the flags, what they liked or what they disliked. And the problem was also that there was one guy who put the flag into the front garden of a family, because that was the place where the asocial people were living. So you can't solve everything with architecture. That's also good to understand. And in the workshops that we helped with those people, at some point we asked them, if you could make a postcard of your neighborhood, what would you put on it? And the only thing that everybody actually really liked was the green surroundings, because that was already there for 30 years. That had the quality, but for the rest, nobody really cared about these houses, because this was what the energy prestation of these houses were pretty bad. And so what we done then, we thought, okay, if you can get the green more inside the neighborhood, then it's nice if you can find this rural architecture that you find there often, this barn kind of architecture, and use that to transform this is the whole neighborhood that we had to look at, into something that was green and more barny, and that we think that has much more identity to it. So we transformed these houses. Where was also the problem that on the backside of these houses we had a lot of self-made extensions by people. So how do you deal with that? And what we've done is that the most important points in the urban design, we kind of make a big extension. It would kind of hide all the messy ones. which looks in the end like this. And the good thing was that if we at some point delivered the model home, and also these tenants could look into their house, because in this model home we had 3 different kitchens, and people could choose if they want to have the kitchen in the front, in the back, or in the middle of the house, or they could even choose out of different options. And if they would choose for an option, their monthly rent would be raised with a couple of euros. So that was also something that was very nice for them, because they could really be part of the design process, although they didn't own the house. And in the end, it was nice because we asked this guy if he could come and make some photos. So we called him the day before. And when we got there, he was dressed up in white and black. And he said that like everything he's done also in the back. He made the cushions of the chairs outside, also in the same colors. And we really felt the pride that we were aiming for. And it was also nice to see that people were now spending much money on new front gardens, new kitchens. So they felt that their neighborhood really got a boost by the project that we've done with the housing association, and therefore they also start spending on the quality of the project. Last but not least, this is the location, Old Shed. This is the location where I live now. This is where my house stands, and I think it's nice to tell. So this is where this house I left tomorrow at 9 o'clock. But what is good to know, to tell, I think, is that in Amsterdam we have this policy of the 40-40-20 rule, which means that 40% is social housing of every development, 40% is for mid-income, and 20% has basically no end. And this is since now I think 2 years, so we have to wait and see if we can make the market a bit better. And the good thing is, from such a development, if you look at this block, maybe you can point out where the social houses are, but I think it's pretty hard to do that. And even if you look to the floor plans, they are exactly the same. So this is the social housing block, and this is the market block. And if you see, the only thing that is different, that these people could choose from like a double balcony or like a bigger window, but for us the floor plans are the same, and these people pay, I don't know, maybe 400,000 for an apartment, and these people only pay 700 euros per month. So it's really good, I think, that this mixed neighborhood makes that we can live in an environment where there's not much segregation, and that is, I think, a really good policy in Amsterdam. So this is, my kids play outside on the square with the people from the social housing block. Actually, it doesn't really matter. So to end with, what makes social housing good housing? I think that question is not relevant. I think the question should be, what makes housing good housing? Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, fascinating presentation. I think we would welcome all your row housing. Although it's very boring, admittedly we have a lot of space, and that is our way of retrofitting the suburbs, transitioning from the single family home to the row housing, and we will welcome the maisonettes from London and the Mews and the walk-up apartments from Paris. Yes, indeed. We want it all here. Now is the time to ask questions. I'm going to ask the 3 presenters to just come to the front, and we have a couple of people with microphones. So we would try to sort of use the geography of clustering so people are not running in opposite directions. But do we have a question? So please come to the front, all of you. And then we would try to address the issues. Fascinating story about, indeed, design excellence and the ability of design to create good housing and social housing and build a community, and indeed contribute to neighborhood revitalization. Question from the audience. A brave one? Anyone that wants to ask a question? There is a question here.
Hi. This question was for Paul. One of the things you mentioned when you were saying that you were putting wood flooring in one of the housings that the council said that you don't waste good materials on social housing, which to me was especially disturbing because it reminded me first of Grenfell Towers. And so my question was, has anything changed in the past 2 years since the towers, as far as building with different materials and a different approach to social housing?
I think the old-fashioned feeling about carpets, low-grade kitchens, low-grade materials, I think that is hopefully ending. That era is definitely the end. Grenfell, I think, is the result of 30 years worth of design and build in the UK. And I think now clients that would always look to the builder for advice over the last, my sort of 12 to 15 years of working on this scale of project, our clients have always listened a lot to us, but when the builders walk in the room as multi-billion pound a year companies, our clients have often gone, well, obviously now the serious people have come into the room, we listen now to those people because they're going to build the building. And it's fair to say we've had a lot of battles and fights with British contractors over the last 10 years in order to build something that we're proud of and that will stand the test of time and will age gracefully and provide value for money for the public sector. So because of Grenfell, I think the client's perception now of builders is really diminished in the UK. And they are now starting to look at regulation again, quality, making sure the architects are retained all the way through the design process, making sure the engineers are retained, making sure that when the project is on site, that people are checking what is actually being built. So I think it's actually the end of design and build, or unregulated design and build in the UK. So I think Grenfell is absolutely transformational. It's unfortunate, obviously, that it had to happen to stop 30 years worth of bad practice.
Thank you.
Yes, and it's how the whole story, how the residents actually went to the brick factory to check the quality of the bricks. Another question.
Good evening. Question for Christelle. One of your projects integrated a kindergarten into the ground floor of the building, and I was curious, is that exclusively for the residents of that building to go to the kindergarten? Okay, and/or were there educational aspects of how a kindergarten is designed brought up to the design, say from the parents, from the children? Just curious how that component gets integrated into the design. I think it's fantastic.
So no, the kindergarten is for the area, and it's of course it's a part of the equipment of the City Hall of Paris, and it's kind of a mix that is quite good for each other, and to mix like the little kids with some because this building was for young working people and also migrant people. So it was, I think the city hall thought it was good like to have a bit of a mix of young people who give like energy and a good spirit.
So it's bringing the community in the social housing project as well as giving back something to the community. Another question? Yes, there? You just have a mic, or maybe you just stand up and shout.
Quick one. I was trying to think around the rent-to-own housing scheme. Is it a possibility, or is it something that is happening within the social housing spectrum? And is it a sustainable model, in your opinion?
In London, rent-to-own hasn't quite happened, but there has been over the last 10 years is shared ownership. So there's an option to buy between 15 and about 35% of the value of the new property, so it's a £400,000 dwelling. People can buy, £100,000 worth of that with a mortgage, and then rent the balance, and then gradually staircase from that 25% over a number of years and buy extra shares in the property up to 100%. So I think it's not perfect, but it does allow people. So in London, anyone really under 40 has been completely frozen out of the buying a property. Unless you're a banker or a corporate lawyer, you can't afford a London house now if you're in your 30s. So through shared ownership, people have been able to get a little bit of a stake in their property and then over the years increase that. So housing associations have been quite big in that role in the last 15 years, and now local authorities also doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Another question? Yes, at the back. Oh, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
My question is in relation to the Amsterdam presentation. I don't want to ruin your name by trying to say it, but I was wondering if you found any negative effects by developing market housing in the same plan as affordable housing, and if there's any like displacement in the surrounding areas or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, actually I think it is very good because the private developer has to think about the quality of the block of the social housing. So mostly it's only one development, and therefore I think it's very good. We also have neighborhoods in Amsterdam where there was much more segregation, but you also see then that the quality of the architecture in those blocks are not so good at all. So I do think that I think it's important that the city also has a good how do you say that maybe a section of all the people who live there, and I think that should not be only on city scale. That should also be on neighborhood scale and even on block scale. So I can't think of any negative. Of course, there are private developers that say, okay, but the entrance of our block, if it's privately owned, that should be our entrance, and that happens a lot. So there's in a way there is a strict segregation, but not in the way you perceive the building or the architecture of the block. Yeah.
A question there.
Hi, my question is about materials. If maybe you could provide one or two tips for using very affordable material, but making it look custom or making it look more expensive than it is. Maybe you have some tips that we could learn from.
The brick.
So I'm not sure I understand well the question. If I have some tips to help you to use some cheap material that look nice, we try to put some quality material outside because this is what's gonna stay the longer in the time. So we put the money in the outside because the social developer, they keep the building 50, 100 years. Compared to the private, they sell and after 10 years it's finished. So they don't put too much. I mean, in my point of view, they don't put as much quality in the construction, in the material. So they use more like painting or cement on the outside, and after a few years, it doesn't look as good. So yeah, I'm quite fan of the brick because it can keep a long time and maintenance is not too much. And we have to make some choice, of course. And we try to be efficient in the design to save some money for the material. In fact, that the real answer is there. And we try also, as Paul, we try to convince the social developer to put money in the material because this is something they're going to keep a long time. And if we put quality, it's easier to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that, if I may add, that the choice of material is cultural and geographically
yes,
embedded. Because, for instance, in the Netherlands and also in Paris, bricks is a very common product because we have like all these rivers bringing the clay to where we make the bricks. If you go to this southern part of Germany, if you see a brick building, people associate that with cheap buildings. So somehow it's also in a way cultural and embedded. I'm not sure if I've just been here for 2 hours now, but I'm not sure if you have a lot of bricks here.
There was another question there in the back.
Hello, my name's Sarah Arthurs, and I'm involved with co-housing in Calgary and building co-housing. And I'd love to hear any experience that you have with that in the UK and in the Netherlands, maybe in France, just kind of what's happening on that kind of front.
What is your definition on co-housing?
So my good question. My definition of co-housing is individual homes and then shared common space. So common kitchen, dining room, and lounge. So each unit is completely self-contained, but there's common space that can be shared by the neighborhood. So usually like no more than 30 to 40 units. So smaller scale, but very much intentional neighborhood.
Yeah.
Does that, in the UK, I know they're certainly doing a lot of projects there.
We're slightly behind because
Well, Denmark is.
we're a little bit more cautious maybe than the Scandinavians and the Swiss. So it's coming. We're probably 30 years behind, I would say, Zurich and Berlin and other cities. I think the finance aspect has been quite difficult in the UK. The banks are not used to 40 people turning up and asking for a collective co-housing mortgage. So at the moment it's only happened on a very, very small scale with often independently quite wealthy people who've sort of been able to buy a plot maybe as big as this room and build on that plot. One thing that is emerging is an idea of community land trusts, and where they're being able to negotiate with the local boroughs or the local city about acquiring quite affordable land and then building at scale as a in perpetuity community land trust. So that is very, very exciting. It's not leading yet to the sort of radical apartment and dwelling plans. And on Friday, I'll speak about some of the projects in Vienna and elsewhere where there is quite radical experimentation in co-housing.
Mm-hmm. Another question? Yes, here at the front. And another one at the back. So, okay. Going up.
Hi. Sorry. Maybe not a question, but maybe just a comment on the quality of the work that was presented tonight. As a practice here in Calgary, myself and my team, we work on a number of housing projects. Some of those have been built, some of them are on the boards. But I think what you presented tonight is actually an attitude about city building. And you had mentioned co-housing and the city as being a shared space. But what I saw that was amazing about the work that you've presented tonight is actually an attitude about the city as a continuum. So the work that you're doing is exceptional, but it's not necessarily exceptional. It's actually about an attitude about urban structure, about creating streets, about creating good environments for people to live in. It's not about moments, but it's about the place and the hole that you can fill within the continuum of the city. And I just wanted to commend you on that, because we always think about the room and the quality of that, but the city and the place that we all have as architects or designers and continuing the quality of that, I think really kind of shows and resonates within the work that you're doing. So I just wanted to say thanks. It's a huge example to what we have here and how we can build cities, how we can think about shared spaces, and how we can work collectively as opposed to individuals to create a city. I think it's a huge example. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you. It is really about building a home and then transitioning to the city block and then to the neighborhood and creating that ownership over the city, co-creating a city all together and sharing these resources. In many ways, it's rediscovering the past and bringing it into the 21st century city and what we have created in the last 50 years or so. There were a couple questions, yes, and I think we probably need to wrap it up. Yes?
I'll be fast, which is not my style. So as a follow-up to that comment, a theme that struck for me between all three presentations was a dignity or an equity with design. So I'm curious about whether it's within your practice or within the cities you work within, what do you think has led to, or that you continue to contribute to create an environment where there's a desire for equity in design? Like all your projects spoke to treating people with dignity and that everyone deserves good design. So how have you built that? Have you built it? Are you still building it? And what can we learn from it?
Anyone? Equity through design?
I mean, we're very, very lucky having, we have 20 clients in the office, 19 are public sector, local government clients who are all incredibly ambitious. And the idea of making a pour door to them is an absolute anathema. They would never consider having a backside and a front side and the expensive building sitting next to the park and the back sitting next to the motorway. They would just never, it would never happen. So from a briefing perspective, we have a charmed life. I think our observation in the last 20 or so years working with community housing and local government is if you build it beautifully, people do take care. If it's well designed and then built beautifully, people really do take care and pride in their neighbourhoods. And I think of the probably several thousand homes we've finished, only one has ever been damaged, and that was the son was a drug dealer, and somebody damaged their property. It wasn't an internal, and it was a sort of an external damage. So that I think that's testament to if you, in a way, provide dignity to the residents, and then they live a great, much better life.
Yes, and even though Amsterdam is widely regarded as the most egalitarian city in the world, although there's trouble in paradise, and he talked about rising housing costs and really incomes lagging behind, but indeed the equity and the design is something that very much has created a strong legacy in Amsterdam.
Yeah, from the beginning on, it was something that was found very important. Many of the first social housing projects that were built are national monuments now. And yeah, so basically for us, we just try to live up the standards that have been set 100 years ago. And not because it was them, but we truly believe that is the way we should treat buildings. And actually, what we also see that if we work for private developers, they just want to do their thing. They want to develop a block and they sell it off and they go to the next one. And a housing association will own the block for the coming 100 years. So they also want that the materials that we choose, that they are good and that they don't have to come back in 5 years to replace the materials. So I think that really helps to make quality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Christelle?
Yes, same. And as Paul said, we believe that if people are proud of where they live, they would take care of it. And this is something that gives us a lot of energy to work in this way. And also, at the agency, when we work, we put the pleasure in perspective. Like, we want to have pleasure, and every time we have a project, we try to imagine we are going to live there.
Right,
So
exactly.
what I would like for me, I'm going to try to translate it for the future.
To create, yes,
to create
yes,
for the others.
indeed. A last question, maybe, or are there more? There was another one. Yes.
Hi. I'm totally struck by the number of agencies that collectively you've worked with. My question is, another thing I noticed also is this attention to craftsmanship, right? And that it's shown in the choice of materials, obviously the pride in which that you go about the design process, and then talking about the long-term effects on residents, this sort of thing, and how that develops the sense of pride, right, that you all touched on in your presentations. But it's interesting thinking about that in terms of the agencies. And I guess I wanted to know more about, especially the design process that Heren talked about with respect to individual residents coming and working in the design process. Actually, all of you talked about that, right? And how that works toward organizing. So can you talk about the idea of the sort of social commitment of the agencies in relation with the residents, and then about the broader goals of community organizing and the shared social project?
Okay.
That's a tall order, but maybe the housing associations.
Good question. I think that first of all, we also see a lot of offices in the Netherlands who don't try to find what these future inhabitants want. I think all private developers and also housing associations, sometimes you don't know who's going to live there. That's also for sure. But I think many housing associations also find it important to stay in good contact with their tenants. Therefore, they are also are willing to go through a process where, for instance, future inhabitants are forming a committee, and therefore the projects that we do, we have to show and take along these people, because they're going to be in there. And if we wouldn't do that, I think the whole process would be not so. It wouldn't go so smooth as it normally goes in most of the projects. So I think it's also something that helps to get a project done together, instead of kind of leaving those people out and doing it only with the housing associations and local governments.
So we have a couple of more questions, but indeed that is a bigger part of the solution, is that kind of institutional mosaic that needs to exist to make it all happen. And incidentally, this is a big question that we are also looking at and exploring in Canadian and other global cities in terms of ways of transfer of good practices. Without the institutions, that might be mission impossible. One more question and then the last one, and then yes.
Thank you for the presentations. I was just wondering, are there any special design strategies that you've used in these buildings to bring the tenants or the residents together to build social capital and social cohesion? This is really important, especially in these kinds of projects.
Mm-hmm.
I think every project we do has exactly that, whether from at one end you have a small community centre, normally built into the new projects, beautiful communal gardens, play streets, play equipment for play spaces for all ranges, publicly accessible parks for the whole neighbourhood. So to make them as integrated as possible. New schemes are now looking at communal workshops, workspace, small business space, hobby rooms again, homework spaces. So in a way, from very young people to very old people, everyone is brought together through the new projects, whether they be refurbishment or a combination of refurb and new build.
Mm-hmm. And the last question?
So a lot of you talked about public consultation and consulting the residents and kind of bring them into the process, which is so refreshing compared to the old prescribed model. I was just kind of wondering on what kind of impacts their feedback even to your designs. Did they alter them in any significant ways? Do they have any really interesting ideas that you never thought of before?
Personally, almost all of our projects come from a resident-led, in a way, the push of the residents to either look at major transformation through refurbishment or a demolition of the existing housing with a rebuilding next door, so a phased replacement of the housing stock. That pressure is definitely ground up from the residents. It's not a top-down, with the local government, we need to renew this district. So it's, for us, it's much more rewarding to work in that way. So when you start a new project, you don't know that area very well, you don't know how the homes are, you don't know how the neighbourhood functions, so you can only learn that really through talking to the local residents and the wider neighbourhood. So almost everything in the new project comes from those conversations. So the residents are not necessarily holding the pencil, but they're sitting with us, and it is a sort of, Sasha used this word, co-production. It really is working, the design team and the residents and the local government who will pay for everything in our projects, sort of in a more triangular relationship. And we think that works quite well.
Mm-hmm. So more of a two-way street, engaging people in the process from the very start and getting them also to design and build and then take ownership and pride. Thank you very much. Thanks are in order right now, because this initiative would not have been possible without the sponsorship of the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, numerous sponsors from the community here in Calgary, but also City of Edmonton, Capital Region Housing, also the schools of Architecture, Planning and Landscape, and obviously the Westman Center of Real Estate and Haskayne School of Business, and many others, including the Open Doors, also the Calgary Housing, the Affordable Housing Collective, and many, many others that have really generously sponsored that research initiative, including the Alberta Real Estate Foundation. We believe that the work here is indeed something that is beneficial for the community and also our industry and community partners, but by and large for the future architects and planners and landscape architects, and indeed the future designers and builders of our exciting city and great neighborhoods. I should also extend thanks to a lot of students whose creativity has been really amazing, from reprogramming the robots so that we can cut out these giant letters, housing, and play with them. The students had some fun, and feel free to take photographs. One thing is not allowed: you're not allowed to sit on the letters, but everything else is allowed. Then also a lot of our students that took graduate courses on affordable housing, you would see their exhibition on this wall, exciting journey and exploration of various good practices in Canadian cities as well as cities around the world, global models that could be really implemented in the future, including a group of our graduate students actually going out to Mexico and helping low-income people to build a home of their own. Our staff has been stellar. Jess, also Alan and Tracy and Nathan, creating the structures for the exhibition that we brought from London and New York here. Come back to the space. More importantly, pick up a card. At the back, you would find the web-based link where you would be able to download all of these fascinating presentations, publications, papers, a lot of exciting explorations, again, created through this initiative, brought together by 40 excellent experts from Canadian cities and cities around the world, from 8 different countries, 15 cities, and 2 continents. And thank you very much to our presenters. This was an excellent panel. Thank you to all of you, a very patient and engaged audience. You've been extremely disciplined. Thank you very much for your questions and your genuine interest in how we can actually build better homes for people where they can live with dignity and pride, and how this could even happen in our very own city starting today. Thank you.